Have you ever started a job somewhere because you were excited for the opportunity to be able to change the culture to match how you believe things should be? And then 3 years later, you realize the culture isn't being changed. You're being changed by the culture. So you leave and go to the next place and expect the exact same thing to happen. And yet 3 years later, you're ready to leave there. This is called the 3-year career phenomenon. I'm going to talk about that today. Welcome into the channel. My name is Tom, and I'm a founder of Vertical Motion, where we help good people become great leaders. If you want to learn more about that, check out the link down below to learn about the programs that we offer to executives and entrepreneurs. But today what we're talking about is this phenomenon that I call the 3-year career phenomenon. It's this thing that happens like when someone goes from job to job to job to job, and it's about every 3 years or so. And there's a reason why this happens for a lot of us. It's not just because we've been laid off. Maybe we're actually really good at what we do, but we just burn out on the culture. So let me explain what's happening here. So I served in the Army from 1993 to 1999, and then I worked for one of the intelligence agencies from 99 to 2003. And so I was in government service for 10 years. And I remember when I left service and went to a corporate job, I was surprised at how much focus was on making money and not necessarily helping the warfighter do their job. And that was a big surprise to me. It was a shock for me. And I remember the first place I went had what I thought was really great culture in the beginning, and then private equity got involved. They spent $250 million to grow it into something it wasn't, and it all fell apart, and the soldiers suffered the most, as well as the employees. Not the shareholders, but like it was just this wild phenomenon that like in the beginning, I thought the culture was aligned with the mission that I had just come from my military service. But instead, it was actually just really about maximizing shareholder value and creating an IPO event for this company. So I left them and went to a much larger company, a Fortune 50 defense contractor, with this mindset that I would change the culture in that corporation and get them to believe in helping the warfighter. 3 years later, I realized that was me banging my head against a ceiling that was never going to move, that the reality was that the culture was there before me and it will be there after me, and I am just one person out of hundreds of thousands who want to impact things in a positive way. But the reality was that just wasn't in the cards for me to change the culture in a corporation that large as an engineer, as a product manager, as a salesperson. I didn't have what I needed, which was the agency to do that. So then I just decided to start my own company, and then I built my own culture. And quite honestly, I built that culture wrong. It was a meritocracy as opposed to being something a little bit more empathetic. And that led to pretty terrible experience with culture. 3 years later, I leave that. I go to another one, 3 years, 3 years, 3 years. You see this pattern. Well, I'm not the only one. A lot of my military friends deal with this as well. I have one friend, he's now had 8 jobs since leaving service, each instance about 2 to 3 years in time. And sometimes that's not his fault that he's leaving these roles. Maybe there's a change in the organization or a change in their direction, but every 3 years, it's this same recurring pattern that he has, that I've had, that other friends of mine have had. I have another friend who's been working for a Fortune 100 company now for the last 4 or 5 years, and he settled there. And instead of bouncing like he was when he left military service, from place to place looking for cultural fit, he just settled and said, you know what, the benefits are pretty good here. I'm just going to stay here, but I don't love the culture and I don't agree with it. And so this is 2 ways that we wind up in a situation where we never really find true happiness in the work that we do. Now, it's very possible to be bouncing upwards in your career, where you go from role to role and you're constantly moving up in your career. This is how one of my friends has done it. He's gone from just an engineer now all the way to vice president, and probably going to be at a higher level here because he just hit the 3-year mark on his last role, and now that's ending. So he's going to be probably moving up in his career because the industry really respects him. When he shows up at public events, he shows up as his authentic self. It just doesn't match the corporate culture that he's coming from in any of the organizations that he's worked at. My other friend, like I said, he's gotten to a point where he's just really stable in his current role. And while he doesn't love the culture, he does appreciate that he's serving the warfighter, working on the mission, and he's also receiving reasonable compensation and benefits for what he's doing. And so in his mind, it's like, let's make the next generation successful. Let me pay for college for my kids so they can have a shot at having a better career in their future. The unfortunate reality is that most of us really feel uninspired about our work, and we don't really connect with the culture of our organization reason, because who cares about maximizing shareholder value except for shareholders and executives who are tied to shareholder compensation packages? It doesn't work for us. It's not something that we can be motivated by. And the reality is that most of us have found work that we're good at, but we might not actually love and enjoy, or maybe we did at one point and we don't anymore. And that was true for me. I spent 25 years in my military defense satellite career, and while I loved the people and I loved the mission, I didn't love the work, and I felt a little bit dirty sometimes when I was doing the work, and I just didn't really feel perfectly connected and aligned with the work I was doing. But I had a mortgage payment. I had 2 car payments. I was trying to save money for college, trying to save money for retirement. And I knew that if I wanted those things, I needed to be a high earner. And so that meant I had to do jobs that I didn't necessarily love, but I was really good at. And that wore me down. And every time I did that, I would get to a point where 2 or 3 years in, I just couldn't do it anymore. And I would have to move on. And I would sometimes even subconsciously sabotage myself so that it would force me to move on. And I did move up and diagonally in my career, ultimately, until I reached the point where I got sick with leukemia, had a revelation, and realized that I was not working in my life purpose, and life is short. And whether I had 6 days, 6 weeks, 6 years, or 6 decades left, I wanted to spend the rest of my life doing something that was in alignment with my life purpose. So I left behind my entire career. And now I do this coaching thing, which is in perfect alignment for me. And I love it. I'm inspired by it. I love waking up and getting to work and doing these things. I didn't feel that way in my primary career. So how do you break this 3-year career phenomenon? How do you break this pattern if you're going through something like this? Well, the first and most important thing to do is to figure out what your life purpose is. There's a lot of really cool tools that you can find online to help you do this. In my program at the Executive Career Accelerator, we use a tool called Ikigai. And Ikigai is a Japanese concept of life purpose. It's interesting to me that in Okinawa, Japan, they don't have a word in Japanese for retirement in the Western sense of the word. Like, we think about retirement as I get to a certain age and I never have to work again. I can just play golf in Florida, I guess. Like, none of us really actually want to play golf in Florida, but we all think about retirement as the goal in our career. And the idea is to make enough money so you never have to do something a boss tells you to do again. You can do what you want and believe. Well, in Okinawa, Japan, their culture, and they're one of these blue zones where people live to be 110 years old, and they're all very happy and healthy. Pretty cool place, actually. There's a lot to learn from them. But they don't have a concept like that. For them, they find what they're passionate about, and then they just do that their entire life. And this is something that we don't teach children in school, to find your passion, find your purpose in life. We don't teach that. We teach, here's how you do the things. Now go get a good job that pays a lot of money in a technical field that you don't love so that you can make your parents proud, right? And the reality is that that just turns out, basically knowledge workers like we used to turn out farm workers a century ago. And we're all miserable because of it. None of us are, or very few of us are living in our life purpose and actually doing what we were meant to do, what we were put on this planet to do. And you can go into a really deep dive into self-exploration to think about life purpose. I like to keep it high level for my clients, right? So we have 150 plus people in this Executive Career Accelerator program. Each of them have gone through this. Some of them have gone through it very fast. Others take their time. In all cases, we want them to stay pretty high level. I want you to think about these things in Ikigai that you care about and that work for you, and then put something quick together and then move your career towards that. You don't have to necessarily change your entire career because you realize that your life passion is to be a photographer on travel, right? Like maybe you're a software engineer and you realize that like travel photography was always your life purpose. Okay, great. Why don't you go work for a company as a software developer who does travel photography, or as a camera company like Sony or something like that? So there's ways to better align your life purpose with your career. And that's really the second step here, right? So first is figure out out what your life purpose is. Step 2 is to align your career to that life purpose. Figure out how you can move towards your life purpose. So I'll give you an example. For me, when I did this exercise in the hospital in September of 2022, when I was still dealing with leukemia, I remember thinking to myself, I want to teach leadership. This is what I'm supposed to do. And I was, at the time, creating some videos for my children to teach them leadership in case I didn't survive. And I decided I'd like to do that for the rest of my life. I'd like to be able to teach leadership, not only to my children, but to as many people as I possibly can before it's my time. And I thought about how can I teach leadership in the role that I have. And actually, I found a way to become a mentor in my current job. And then as it grew, I realized I really want to do this permanently, full-time. And so I let go of my full-time job and stepped into coaching, and it's worked out for us. But I didn't have to do that. I could teach leadership as an executive myself in a company. Like I was the number 2 guy in a publicly traded company. I had a sales, marketing, BD, and I could mentor my team. I could mentor the other people in the organization. I could mentor customers. I could do this part-time on the side without interfering with anything. I can do it, as a nonprofit, giving back to society. There was a lot of ways for me to teach leadership. I just chose to turn it into a full-time profession because, quite honestly, I'm the kind of person that has to go all in on something. And I think most people who have this 3-year career phenomenon happen to them are people who have to go all in on something. They have to believe in the culture that they're working inside. They have to believe in the mission that they're working on. So 1, find your life purpose. 2, align your career to that. And 3, be willing to move in order to actually make this happen for yourself. And you need to be willing to move sometimes diagonally down or laterally as opposed to diagonally up into a different organization, into a different entire industry, or even an entire different profession. So for me, for example, I actually moved diagonally down at first. I was making good money as an executive, and then I started this coaching business, and it took a little while for it to get going. And in the beginning, I was working a whole lot harder on this coaching business than I did in my executive role. And that was okay because I was in alignment with my life purpose, and it didn't feel like work. And that's the most important thing to understand here, is that when you are working in alignment with your life purpose, when your career aligns with your life purpose, it doesn't feel like work, y'all. Like, this is a real thing. There are actually people out here like me who love what we do, and we are inspired by the work. And when we actually do our job, we get energized from it, not drained and demoralized. And it took me 25 years to figure this out, that I'm actually meant for more than what I thought I was. And I am meant to do something different than what I thought I was. I was really good at what I did, and I could get paid really well for it. And the world needed what I did, but I just didn't love it. Now I have all 4 of those things true, and it just makes things so much easier. And so when you are in alignment with your purpose and your career, it doesn't feel like work. And that's why you can actually move to a job where you're making less money, but it puts you in the right trajectory, aiming you in the right direction. There was this moment that I had when I started coaching that I realized I can do this past retirement. And that was the first time I had ever thought about something like that, where I could actually do my job in retirement, that I liked my job that much. It never occurred to me that I would want to be an executive for a satellite or defense or space organization or, a defense unit. It never occurred to me that I would want to do that in retirement. Now with coaching, I realized that I can do this in retirement, and there really isn't a point at which I need to retire. I may scale back how much I work when I can't anymore, but retirement doesn't really make sense to me anymore. And now I have this Okinawan concept of retirement, which is, I guess I will stop working when I can no longer talk to someone on a Zoom call or help someone, right? And so in that moment, then I would be retired, and hopefully at that point pretty close to death, because I'd have nothing left to do. So that's the 3-year career phenomenon. This idea that every 3 years you start somewhere, you're excited to change the culture and change their beliefs and change the way they do things because you know the right way. And then by year 2, you're like, nobody's listening to me. And by year 3, I got to get out of here. And then you go to the next place and it happens all over again. That cycle is common. It happens to a lot of us. And it's because we're searching for purpose. If you can find your purpose, align your career to it, and be willing to move, even sometimes diagonally downward in your career, towards your life purpose, on the long term, you will become much happier. you'll go so much further in your career. You'll go so much further in your life, and you'll stop stressing about how much money do you have before you can stop putting up with Becky's emails. So consider this 3-year career phenomenon. If this is happening to you, consider going through a process like Ikigai. And if you want help with that, we do this in our Executive Career Accelerator program at Vertical Motion. So there's a link down below to learn more, where you can talk with a discovery coach about how we can help you align your career with your life purpose and get you moving upwards in the right direction. That's what I have for you today. I hope this is a good one, and I will see you in the next one.